Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Reaper Minis TV. I hope that I can have a review and some footage to show you of the Savage North expansion before I head off to Gen Con. If not, I'll definitely have stuff to show you, a lot of Reaper stuff to show you after I get back from Gen Con. So for right now, let's get into some new reviews. First up from the Chronoscope line is Slade. He's a cyborg hero, and this is a two-piece miniature, but you actually get three parts. You get the main body and almost all of the miniature as a single piece, and then for his right hand, you can either have a bionic hand or sort of a cannon kind of attachment. Now these fit on right at the wrist. They're both cast on a separate sprue. They come off that pretty easily. Need a very minimal amount of cleaning, and I think that Slade would fit in perfectly into a superhero game or a sci-fi game. If you're going to be playing the new DC Adventures or Mutants and Masterminds 3, whichever version of that rule set you're going to play, he would be perfect as Cyborg from the Teen Titans, or I don't even know what they're called nowadays. But anyway, he'd be perfect in that role. In a sci-fi game, in a cyberpunk game, or far future game, as a robot hero or cyborg hero, I think he'd be great in that. The base miniature itself, everything except for the hand attachments, did need some cleaning also. There was a visible mold line under each arm and a few faint mold lines along the legs, but nothing that was too hard to clean up. He went together quickly, and he looks like he'd be very easy to paint and be on the table in no time at all. Next up from the Chronoscope line is Andre Durand, and he's billed as being a time chaser, so some kind of immediate or obvious connotation of him being a time traveler, but don't think you have to use him that way. I think he has a regular enough of a sci-fi feel to where you could drop him into any futuristic game and he'd look fine. It's a single piece miniature, and he's carrying a gun in his right hand. His left hand has some kind of either powered attachment or it's a bionic hand. And on his belt, you can see a pistol. It almost looks like a fantasy piratey kind of pistol, but could easily be a very ornate laser pistol. He has goggles up on his head and some extra pouches for extra detail. And on his belt, it looks like he has some kind of little time device or something like that. Maybe that's to help him tell where and when he is. I'm not sure. But good sci-fi figure. He needed a little bit of cleaning. Under the arms there was a visible mold line, but I think in Traveler, D20 Future, or even into a 40K role-playing game, you could drop him in and he'd work perfectly. Okay, on to some Dark Heaven Legends figures now, and this is Brandel Birchstaff. He's an Archmage, single-piece miniature, very much reminds me of Gandalf from the Lord of the Ring movies. He has a large pointy hat on and a staff in one hand, and he's extending his left hand out to cast a spell. Now the staff was bent in the package. I had to carefully get it back into position after getting it out of the package and taking pictures of it, but took a minute or two to get it back into good position. Just be careful when you're doing it so you don't break it off. The figure itself does look a little bit flat, but the pose that he's in is sort of action-oriented, so it does help add a sense of animation or movement to the model. You can see some mold lines on the underside of the cloak, like under where his arms are, and along the sides of it there's some mold lines that needed to be cleaned up. There's a little bit of extra metal at the bottom of one side of his cloak, and then also a mold line along the staff itself that needed to be cleaned up. So it took a little bit longer than some of the miniatures we already looked at to clean up. He has long stringy hair and a very full beard that is also stringy like his hair that hangs down past his belt, and he's got some extra details on the model. There's detailing on the sash of his cloak and also some extra pouches that are on almost like another sash that has pouches attached to it. There's also a bag that's on a belt that's around his shoulders that you can pick out. Obviously he'd do fine as a player character of a spellcaster in D&D or other fantasy role-playing game, but I think you could also drop him into maybe an Empire army for Warhammer Fantasy Battle as a spellcaster. Next is Kriv Blackspear, and he's a Dragon Man, and there are 4 pieces here. You'll either use 2 or 3 of these when you're assembling the model. The first piece is the base model itself, which is the legs, the torso, the head, and almost all of both arms. You can see he's wearing heavy armor that's a combination of plates. Also looks like some bones in there. There are skulls adorning each one of his shoulder plates. There's also some fur that makes up his armor, so he's very heavily armored. There's a very large bag on a sort of left rear side, a smaller one on the right rear side that he's carrying some loot in, and he has a dagger down on his left boot. And that's all for the base model, and then you have to decide how you want to put him together. You can either put him together with a large two-handed spear or an axe, and a shield. Now if you go the two-handed spear route, this is going to be the two-piece build. And all of the weapons and his shield come on a separate sprue. You just have to carefully clip them off and clean them. Each one did need some cleaning. There were some visible mold lines and extra bits of metal from the casting process. Now the two-handed spear fits into the two nubs that are pretty much right as elbows, and you have the hands and the spear as a single piece. This fits pretty well into place. I did have to do a little bit of extra cleaning or maneuvering of the pieces, a little bit of manhandling of them to get them to fit absolutely perfectly, but it was not a difficult process at all. Now, if you go with the the axe and shield route, the axe is going to be in his right hand, and you do have a little bit of posability to rotate it around the elbow joint a little bit. If you want it off to the side or just coming over the top, you can have it either way. The shield also fits into place similarly to where you have a little bit of rotation there if you want to move it around a little bit. I do like that Reaper's coming out with more of the non-human or non-standard humanoid races for player character type models, and that's what this guy really is here, is a very good Dragon Man, Draconian, Dragonborn, or whatever you want to call them, player character model, I think. But you could also use him as the leader or champion or the heavy in a group of dungeon monsters that are challenging your PCs. I'm going to be using him in a Lizardman army for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. To get him onto a 1-inch square base, I will have to cut up the integrated base that he's on a little bit, but I've already done a test fit, and he will fit on a 1-inch base just fine. So for me, he's going to make a great champion or leader for a unit of Saurus Warriors or Temple Guard along those lines, but you could use him in D&D, in Pathfinder, any kind of game where you have a lizard man as a player character race, he'll be fine. Alright, and then to round out this episode, I want to give you a quick preview look at the new races or factions that you'll see in the Savage North book for Warlord.